I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into an inspirational book. It is called Parables of a 21st Century Shepherd and Other Farm Stories. It's written by Reverend Dale Hetherington. This unique collection merges pastoral wisdom with everyday farm life, offering spiritual insights through simple yet profound narratives. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his insightful book. The links are below this interview. Reverend, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Good to see you too.
So you are the 21st century shepherd in this book, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, this all started and took place in the 20th century. But I thought by the time this book comes out, that's going to sound pretty dated. So
Exactly.
since it was started in the 90s, we're going to go ahead and call it the 21st Century Shepherd.
Sounds great. So in the 90s, you start farming, right?
Well, I moved to a farm.
Okay.
And I was in Indiana here and married Carol, and she lived on this farm, and that's where we started raising sheep. The sheep project came about, as I said in the book, because our youngest daughter needed a 4-year project for her FFA class at high school. And so we started raising sheep then.
Gotcha. And as you started raising sheep, the significance of being a shepherd, particularly with biblical overtones, started ringing true for you, right?
Yeah, because about the same time was when I started pastoring, and I could see similarities in working with the sheep and working with the people in the church. Um, I don't think that's a slam on anybody because actually Jesus used that same analogy, and in fact, God does throughout the whole of Scripture of the sheep and the shepherd. Some people think that, well, sheep are dumb animals, and so you're insulting people, but sheep aren't dumb animals. They're vulnerable animals, but they're not dumb.
Exactly, exactly. Throughout the Bible, we hear verses such as, "The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want," and so forth and so on. Um, Tell us what is profound about the Lord being our shepherd.
Main thing about the Lord being our shepherd is the way he cares for us. Without the shepherd, the sheep are going to die because they are vulnerable, they're defenseless, and they have to have somebody that will defend them. And that's what he does. They have to have somebody that will lead them to different pastures because when sheep are out in the open like that, they'll stay in the same spot and they'll graze until the grass is gone. And it's up to the shepherd to move the sheep from one pasture to another to keep the grass green and growing so that the sheep always have food. And that's how the shepherd feeds his sheep, at least in Jesus' day, and that method of shepherding.
Absolutely.
So,
Give us the folks at home an overview of your book, what the story is about.
well, the story is about a recollection of events that happened in our life and how I could see parallels between that and church work and church life. Even from the very beginning of going to seminary, the whole idea of raising sheep was new for us. And we wanted to learn about how to do this before starting. So we went to the library. That was what you did back in the 90s. You couldn't use your smartphone because we didn't have them. So
Yeah.
we went to the library and got 3 books on raising sheep, and each one of them said something different. So it was like, okay, that still doesn't help us. When you go to seminary, you find out by the time you graduate that you're going to use 20% of what you learn in your ministry. And I knew there were things that, I was learning there that I wasn't going to be using, but there were things that I was, and it was up to me to sort it out. It's in the same way with those books, that there were some things that I was going to be using from them, some that I wasn't. I just had to sort it out. So
Absolutely. Give us an example of a story that drove the point home to you and that you share in the book.
there are so many. Um, I think one is the story of Patty, who was our bell sheep.
Mhm.
A bell sheep was the one that a shepherd would get closest to in the flock, and he would put a bell around the sheep's neck. And when it was time to move, and the shepherd would lead, the bell sheep would follow because it's like Mary had a little lamb, and the sheep would follow the shepherd. Well, and the other sheep heard the bell, the flock would follow that sheep. And Patty was the name of the sheep that was our bell sheep. I was able to get real close to her, and so there were times when the sheep would get out, and I needed to get them back in. The easiest way to do that was to get Patty to follow me back in, and the rest of the sheep would follow her. That was seen in the church because a lot of times the pastor doesn't have the influence that you would think he does, especially in
Mhm.
business meetings, because the pastor doesn't really know anything about finance. He knows things about theology.
Mhm.
That's the thinking. And while that may be true in some cases, uh, so you find that one of the best ways to get things done is to cultivate relationship with a leader in the church and talk to them aside and say, this would be a good idea if we did this. What do you think? And you bounce it around with them. And if they're on board, then they say something in the business meeting, and the rest of the people will say, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We'll let the pastor bring up that same thought. And it's like, no, I don't think so.
Exactly.
So that's just the way it happens. And so a pastor has two choices. He can either fight this and try to force himself on the people, which isn't going to work, or he can work with the system, and his ministry will go a lot easier and a lot smoother.
So basically, you have to find your bell sheep among the congregants.
Right,
Yeah,
right. Somebody that you can relate with, that the people will follow, that people will trust and follow that way. And yeah, I think that was the main story in there that really started the whole ball rolling, was seeing that
absolutely.
with that sheep.
Absolutely. I think that has implications for business, personal
Hmm.
relations, and beyond.
Yeah,
You've got to find that one person who can persuade the others to move on. Even if
right,
you're the idea man, even if you're the boss, even if you're the leader, that might not be you.
right.
Yeah.
And it's not about, manipulating people either,
Mm.
or trying to get them to do something that they don't want to do, but it's taking barrier out of the way. And that barrier being, do they really trust you in this field or not?
Sure.
And find somebody that they do trust. And when you talk with somebody one on one, it's easier to help them understand the all the things that go on. It gets less emotional than in a business meeting. In a
Exactly.
business meeting, it's hard to make your point as well, because then emotions come up and other things cloud the issue. So
Yeah. You want to be
that's what it's about.
persuasive and you want to help people make the best decision. And
Right,
sometimes that means rallying the allies that you can find within your ranks to help you out with that.
right.
Who is this book written for, and what do you hope they take away from it?
Well, I didn't write it with a particular audience in mind. I wanted to share these things, but when I just to share these things, but when I think about it, I think it would be helpful for pastors, of course, but also for people, just lay people, people in the church, to understand how things work together in the church and how people relate to each other. Life is about our relationships. It's not so much about programs and um, putting on different things and doing things. It's about the relationships that we cultivate. And that's how the gospel is spread because, Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. And by this, all people will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. It's our relationships with each other and with other people that show the world who we are and that we are disciples of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great points. Great book. The name of the book is Parables of a 21st Century Shepherd and Other Farm Stories. It's written by a wonderful author. His name is Reverend Dale Hetherington. And the book is a unique collection of pastoral wisdom that contains everyday farm life as well, stories from it and how it relates to spiritual teachings, the Bible, leadership, and running a church as well. Reverend, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this 7 o'clock on Spotlight.